The coyotes had her cornered against the broken wagon wheel, 3 of them circling with yellow eyes gleaming in the dusk. And Adelaide Lawrence swung that cast-iron frying pan like her life depended on it, because it absolutely did. The sunset painted the Nebraska prairie in shades of crimson and gold, but she had no time to appreciate the beauty as another coyote darted forward and received a resounding crack across its snout that sent it yelping backward. Her calico dress was torn at the hem, her dark hair had escaped its pins hours ago, and her arms ached something fierce, but she would not stop fighting. That was when she heard the laughter. It rolled across the grassland like thunder, deep and genuinely amused, and Adelaide whipped her head around to see a man on horseback watching her from about 30 feet away. He sat easy in the saddle, one hand resting on his thigh, the other holding the reins loosely, and he was grinning like he had just witnessed the finest entertainment of his life. The dying light caught the dust on his dark hat and the stubble on his strong jaw. "You planning to help or just sit there enjoying the show?" Adelaide shouted, swinging the pan again as a coyote tested her defenses. The cowboy touched his fingers to his hat brim, then smoothly drew his revolver and fired 3 shots into the air. The sharp cracks echoed across the prairie, and the coyotes scattered like leaves in a storm, their forms disappearing into the tall grass. He holstered the weapon with practiced ease and urged his horse forward, coming to a stop a few feet from where Adelaide stood trembling with exhaustion and fury. "That was the damnedest thing I have seen in all my years," he said, still smiling. "Most women would have fainted or screamed." "You decided to take on a pack of coyotes with cooking equipment. Most men would have helped instead of watching," Adelaide shot back, though she lowered the frying pan to her side. Her whole body was shaking now that the danger had passed. He swung down from his horse with fluid grace, and she could see him properly now. He was tall and broad-shouldered, probably in his mid-20s, with brown eyes that held both intelligence and warmth. His clothes marked him as a working rancher, worn but well-maintained, and he moved with the confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Fair point," he conceded, walking closer. "Though in my defense, you seem to have matters well in hand. Name is Nathaniel Young. I run a cattle ranch about 5 miles west of Lincoln." "Adelaide Lawrence," she replied automatically, then looked back at the destroyed wagon behind her. The axle had broken that morning, stranding her on this endless stretch of prairie with nothing but the belongings she could carry and the provisions that had survived the crash. "I was trying to reach Lincoln before nightfall." Nathaniel followed her gaze, taking in the situation with a practiced eye. "That wagon is not going anywhere without serious repairs. You traveling alone?" "I was traveling with the Murphy family, but we got separated 2 days ago when their youngest came down with fever. They stopped at a homestead to tend to him, and I continued on because I had a position waiting in Lincoln." Adelaide felt the weight of her circumstances settling on her shoulders. "Or I did have a position. I was supposed to start work as a school teacher yesterday. 2 days ago." Nathaniel's expression shifted to concern. "You have been out here alone for 2 days. I can take care of myself." Even as she said it, Adelaide swayed slightly on her feet. She had not eaten since the previous evening, and the fight with the coyotes had drained her remaining strength. Nathaniel caught her elbow, steadying her with surprising gentleness. "I can see that. Any woman who fights off coyotes with a frying pan has my respect, but you look about ready to drop and it will be full dark soon. Let me take you to my ranch. You can rest, get a proper meal, and tomorrow I will drive you into Lincoln in my wagon." Pride warred with practicality in Adelaide's chest. She had been taught to be self-reliant, to never accept charity, but she also was not foolish enough to refuse genuine help when she desperately needed it. "I do not want to impose." "No imposition," Nathaniel said firmly. "Besides, I could use someone with your particular skills." "My skills?" Adelaide raised an eyebrow. He gestured at the frying pan still clutched in her hand. "Anyone who can wield cookware like that has to be decent in the kitchen. My ranch hands have been complaining about my cooking for months. Been trying to hire a cook, but nobody wants to work that far from town." His eyes sparkled with humor. "You are hired if you want the job. Better pay than teaching, I would wager, and you would not have to deal with rowdy children. You are offering me employment based on watching me hit coyotes. I am offering you employment based on watching you refuse to give up when most folks would have panicked. That tells me more about your character than any letter of recommendation." Nathaniel's tone turned more serious. "Look, Miss Lawrence, I am not trying to take advantage. You need work, I need a cook. My ranch has a separate cabin for the cook, so you would have your own space and privacy. 3 square meals for the hands plus me, basic cleaning of the main house. I pay $30 a month plus room and board." Adelaide's breath caught. $30 was significantly more than the teaching position had offered. It would allow her to save money, perhaps eventually buy her own property. But working on a ranch, living in such proximity to men she did not know, it could damage her reputation beyond repair. Then again, her reputation was already compromised by being stranded alone on the prairie. At least this way she would have a roof over her head and honest work. "Can I think about it overnight?" she asked. "Of course." Nathaniel released her elbow and stepped back, giving her space. "For tonight, you are my guest regardless. Let me gather what you need from your wagon." Together they salvaged what they could. Adelaide's carpetbag of clothing and personal items, some books that had survived the crash, and a few cooking supplies. Nathaniel secured everything to his horse, then helped Adelaide up into the saddle before swinging up behind her. She stiffened at the intimacy of the arrangement, very aware of his solid presence at her back and his arms on either side of her as he took the reins. "Just hold on," he said quietly near her ear. "We will take it slow." The ride to the Young ranch took about an hour, the sky darkening from purple to black overhead as stars emerged like scattered diamonds. Nathaniel kept up a steady stream of conversation, telling her about the ranch and the surrounding area, clearly trying to put her at ease. Adelaide found herself relaxing despite her circumstances, charmed by his easygoing manner and the obvious pride he took in his work. "My father started the ranch 15 years ago," Nathaniel explained as they rode. "Died 3 years back, left it to me and my younger brother. But Jackson decided ranch life was not for him and headed to California last year, so now it is just me and 5 ranch hands." "That must be lonely," Adelaide said without thinking, then immediately regretted the personal observation, but Nathaniel just chuckled. "Sometimes. I stay busy enough that I do not dwell on it much. The hands are good men, been with me since my father's time. They will treat you with nothing but respect, I give you my word on that." The ranch house emerged from the darkness, a sprawling single-story structure built of wood and stone. Even in the dim light from the windows, Adelaide could see it was well maintained. A barn stood nearby, and several smaller outbuildings dotted the property. Nathaniel guided the horse to the front of the house and dismounted, then helped Adelaide down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, stiff from the long ride. "Easy," Nathaniel murmured, supporting her again. "Let us get you inside and fed." The interior of the house was simple but comfortable, clearly the domain of a bachelor. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall and a sturdy table surrounded by mismatched chairs. Doors led off to what Adelaide assumed were bedrooms. Everything was relatively clean but lacked the touches that made a house a home. No curtains on the windows, no decorations on the walls, purely functional. Nathaniel settled her into a chair by the fireplace and moved to the kitchen area, building up the fire in the stove and pulling out ingredients. "I am going to make you something quick. Eggs and bacon, some bread. Nothing fancy, but it will fill your stomach." Adelaide watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements despite his self-deprecating comments about his cooking. "You do not seem incompetent in the kitchen." "I can manage the basics without poisoning anyone," he replied with a grin, "but variety is not my strength. The hands get eggs and bacon for breakfast, beans and beef for dinner, and more beans for supper. They would probably weep with joy if you served them an actual pie or a decent stew." Despite her exhaustion and uncertain circumstances, Adelaide found herself smiling. There was something deeply appealing about Nathaniel Young, beyond his obvious physical attractiveness. He possessed a fundamental decency and kindness that put her at ease, even though they had met less than 2 hours ago. The food was as basic as he had promised, but to Adelaide it tasted like the finest restaurant meal. She ate ravenously, not caring about manners, and Nathaniel refilled her plate without comment. Only when she finally pushed back from the table, completely satisfied, did he speak. "The cook's cabin is about 50 yards from here, but I think tonight you should take my spare bedroom. You are dead on your feet, and I do not want you stumbling around in the dark. I will sleep in the bunkhouse with the hands." "I cannot take your bed," Adelaide protested. "You can and will." His tone was gentle but firm. "The bedroom on the right is mine. The one on the left is the spare. Clean sheets on the bed, water in the pitcher. Take what time you need in the morning. I will be up before dawn with the hands, but you rest as long as your body requires." Adelaide was too tired to argue further. Nathaniel showed her to the spare room, which was small but scrupulously clean, with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a washstand. He brought in her carpetbag and then withdrew, closing the door behind him. She barely managed to wash her face and hands before collapsing onto the bed, still wearing her torn calico dress. Sleep claimed her instantly. Adelaide woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee drifting from the other room. For a moment she was disoriented, then memory returned in a rush. The broken wagon, the Coyotes, Nathaniel Young. She sat up quickly, noting that the sun was already well above the horizon. She must have slept for hours. After using the water in the pitcher to wash more thoroughly, Adelaide changed into a fresh dress from her carpetbag, a simple gray cotton that was far more practical than fashionable. She plaited her dark hair into a neat braid and then ventured out into the main room. Nathaniel sat at the table, account book spread before him and a cup of coffee at his elbow. He looked up when she entered and smiled. "Good morning. Coffee is on the stove, still hot. There are eggs and bacon staying warm in the pan. What time is it?" Adelaide asked, moving toward the kitchen area. "About 9. You needed the rest." He closed the account book and stood stretching. "I have the wagon ready whenever you want to head into Lincoln, or have you given any thought to my offer?" Adelaide poured herself coffee and took a fortifying sip before turning to face him. "I have thought about little else, but I need to understand exactly what you are proposing. You mentioned a separate cabin. Come on, I will show you." Nathaniel led her outside into the bright Nebraska morning. The ranch looked even better in daylight, well organized and prosperous. Nathaniel pointed out the various buildings as they walked: the barn, the bunkhouse where the ranch hands slept, the smokehouse, and finally a small cabin set slightly apart from the other structures. It was built of sturdy logs with a stone chimney, and though it was not large, it appeared solid and well maintained. Inside, the cabin consisted of a single room with a sleeping area, a small kitchen corner, and a sitting space near the fireplace. It was dusty from disuse, but had good bones. A narrow bed stood in one corner, and someone had built shelves into the walls for storage. My father built this for our first cook, a woman named Mrs. Henderson, Nathaniel explained. She worked here for 5 years before moving to Lincoln to live with her daughter. That was 2 years ago, and I have not been able to find a suitable replacement since. The job is simple enough. Cook 3 meals a day for 6 men, keep the main house reasonably clean, and help with preserving when we slaughter or when the garden comes in. Your time outside of those duties is your own. And the men, Adelaide asked quietly, you say they are respectful, but I have heard stories. Nathaniel's expression turned serious. I will not lie to you, Miss Lawrence. The world can be hard on a woman alone, and there are men who would see your situation as an opportunity. But I give you my word that will not happen here. Any man who treats you with anything less than complete respect will be dismissed immediately. No second chances. That includes me. The sincerity in his voice convinced her more than any elaborate promises could have. Adelaide took a breath and made her decision. All right, I will take the position on a trial basis. 1 month, and if either of us feels it is not working, I will move on with no hard feelings. The smile that spread across Nathaniel's face transformed him from handsome to devastating. That is fair. Should we shake on it, make it official? He extended his hand, and Adelaide took it. His grip was warm and strong, calloused from hard work, and the contact sent an unexpected tingle through her. From the way his eyes widened slightly, she suspected he felt it too. Welcome to the Young ranch, Miss Lawrence, he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. If we are going to be working together, you should probably call me Adelaide. Adelaide. He tested her name like he was tasting something sweet. Then you should call me Nathaniel, or Nate. Most folks use Nate. They stood there for a moment longer than necessary, hands still clasped, before Adelaide gently pulled away. I should probably meet the rest of the crew. Right. Yes. Nathaniel seemed to shake himself. They are out checking the herd, but they will be back for dinner. That gives you a few hours to settle in if you like, or I can still take you into Lincoln if you need supplies. I have enough to start with, Adelaide decided. Though at some point, I will need to send word to the school board that I will not be taking the teaching position. I can take care of that when I go into town for supplies tomorrow, Nathaniel offered. Anything else you need? What Adelaide needed was to understand why her heart was beating faster every time Nathaniel smiled at her, but that was not something she could articulate. Instead, she shook her head and watched as he headed back toward the main house, supposedly to give her time to settle in, but more likely to tend to the dozen tasks that filled a rancher's day. The cabin required a thorough cleaning before it would be habitable, so Adelaide threw herself into the work. She found cleaning supplies in the main house, and Nathaniel helped her carry over fresh linens and a few pieces of furniture he thought she might need. By early afternoon, the little cabin had been transformed into a cozy space that Adelaide could genuinely call her own. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, she turned her attention to preparing dinner for men she had not yet met. The larder in the main house was well stocked with basics: flour, beans, salt pork, potatoes, onions, and various preserved goods. Adelaide decided on a hearty stew, fresh biscuits, and a dried apple pie if she had time. She was rolling out biscuit dough when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw 5 riders heading toward the barn, dust rising from their horses' hooves. The ranch hands had returned. Nathaniel emerged from one of the outbuildings and called the men over. Adelaide could not hear what he was saying, but she saw him gesture toward the house. 5 pairs of eyes turned in her direction, and she resisted the urge to duck out of sight. Instead, she kept working, determined to make a good first impression through her cooking if nothing else. A few minutes later, Nathaniel entered the house with 2 of the men. "Adelaide, I would like you to meet Tom Griffin and Samuel Porter. Tom is my foreman, been working this ranch since my father's time. Sam handles the horses." Tom was an older man, probably in his 50s, with graying hair and a weathered face that creased into a friendly smile. "Mighty pleased to meet you, miss. Nate tells us you fought off a pack of coyotes with that frying pan there." "Word travels fast," Adelaide said, feeling her cheeks warm. "Good story like that. Of course it does." Sam was younger, maybe 30, with an easy grin. "Any woman tough enough to do that is tough enough to handle us, I reckon." The other 3 hands filed in. Billy Chen, whose family had come from China to work on the railroads before settling in Nebraska. Robert Red Murphy, named for his shock of copper hair, and James Little, the youngest of the group at probably 19 or 20. All of them greeted Adelaide with courtesy and obvious curiosity. "Something smells amazing," Red said, inhaling deeply. "Is that actual stew? And biscuits," Billy added, sounding reverent. "And pie if you all can wait another hour," Adelaide told them, amused by their reactions. "We will wait all day for pie," Tom declared. "Miss, no offense to Nate, but his cooking could make a strong man weep." "I am standing right here," Nathaniel protested, but he was grinning. The men scattered to wash up and tend to their horses, and Adelaide finished preparing the meal. When she finally called them to eat, the 6 men crowded around the table with an eagerness that might have been comical if it was not so touching. They had clearly been missing proper home cooking. Adelaide served the stew and watched as they dug in with enthusiasm. The compliments came fast and sincere, and she felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Cooking had always been one of her talents, something she genuinely enjoyed, and it was gratifying to see her efforts so appreciated. As the meal progressed, the men peppered her with questions about her background. Adelaide found herself relaxing, telling them about growing up in Ohio, losing her parents to influenza 2 years ago, and deciding to head west for a fresh start. She carefully edited the parts about being stranded alone on the prairie, not wanting to seem foolish or incompetent. "Well, their loss is our gain," Tom said when she finished. "If you cook like this regularly, we will be the happiest ranch in Nebraska." "I will do my best," Adelaide promised. When she brought out the pie, still warm from the oven, James actually looked like he might cry. "I have not had apple pie since I left home," he said quietly. "Then have 2 pieces," Adelaide told him, and his face lit up like a child on Christmas morning. After the meal, the men insisted on clearing the table and washing dishes, shooing Adelaide away when she tried to help. She found herself on the porch with Nathaniel, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. "They like you," Nathaniel said, leaning against the porch railing. "I can tell. They are good men. You were right about that." "Did you doubt me?" Adelaide considered the question honestly. "I wanted to trust you, but I have learned to be cautious. The world is not always kind to women without family or protection." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask what brought you out here? To Nebraska, I mean. It is a long way from Ohio." "My parents died, as I said. I had no other family, and the people in our town, they were kind, but I did not want to be the object of pity forever. I wanted to build something of my own, somewhere no one knew me as poor Adelaide Lawrence, the orphan." She paused, surprised by her own honesty. There was something about Nathaniel that invited confidence. "What about you? You mentioned your brother left. Did you never want to go elsewhere, see the world beyond this ranch? This ranch is my world, Nathaniel said simply. My father built it from nothing, broke his back to make it prosper. Keeping it going, making it better, that is how I honor his memory. Besides, I like the work, like being outside, working with the animals and the land. Some folks need cities and excitement, but I am content here. That is a rare thing, being content, Adelaide observed. What about you? Are you content? The question caught her off guard. Was she content? She had been existing, surviving, moving from one day to the next since her parents' deaths. But content? I think I might be eventually. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I have a chance to build something stable. Nathaniel turned to look at her, his brown eyes serious. I am glad you are here, Adelaide. I know we just met, and this is probably forward of me to say, but I have a good feeling about this, about you being here. Adelaide's heart did that strange, fluttering thing again. I have a good feeling too, she admitted softly. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility, until Tom called from inside about some ranch business that needed Nathaniel's attention. He excused himself with obvious reluctance, and Adelaide was left alone with her thoughts and the vast Nebraska sky. The first few weeks at the Young ranch fell into a comfortable rhythm. Adelaide rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spending her mornings in the main house kitchen while the men ate and discussed the day's work. She learned their preferences. Tom liked his coffee strong enough to strip paint. Billy had a sweet tooth and appreciated any baked goods. Red could eat twice his weight in anything involving potatoes, and James was always hungry. Nathaniel usually ate breakfast quickly and then disappeared to oversee the day's work, but she noticed he always found reasons to return to the house throughout the day. He would need a drink of water, or want to check on something in his office, or remember a tool he had left behind. Adelaide suspected these visits had more to do with seeing her than any genuine necessity, and she could not deny the little thrill she felt each time she heard his boots on the porch. They talked during these brief encounters, conversations that started superficial but gradually deepened. She learned that Nathaniel could recite poetry his mother had taught him, that he worried constantly about his cattle and the unpredictable Nebraska weather, that he sent money to his brother in California even though Jackson never wrote back. He learned that Adelaide played piano though there was no instrument on the ranch, that she loved thunderstorms, that she had once wanted to be a writer but had never shown her stories to anyone. Why not? Nathaniel asked one afternoon when he had found her reading during a break between meals. Because they are probably terrible, Adelaide said with a self-deprecating laugh. Just silly romances, nothing of substance. I doubt anything you created would be terrible. The conviction in his voice made her look up. You should write if it makes you happy. Life is too short to deny yourself joy. It was observations like that, casual but profound, that made Adelaide increasingly aware of how much she enjoyed Nathaniel's company, how much she looked forward to seeing him each day, how her pulse quickened when he smiled at her. She realized with a mix of delight and trepidation, developing feelings for her employer. The realization came into sharp focus one evening when a neighboring rancher, Marcus Dalton, stopped by to discuss purchasing some breeding stock. He was close to Nathaniel's age, reasonably attractive, and clearly prosperous. Over dinner, he paid Adelaide several compliments on her cooking and her appearance, and asked if she might be interested in attending a dance in Lincoln the following weekend. Before Adelaide could formulate a response, Nathaniel cut in. Adelaide works 6 days a week. She is not available for social engagements. The sharpness in his tone surprised everyone at the table. Marcus raised his eyebrows. Tom suddenly became very interested in his plate, and Adelaide felt a flush of confusion and something that might have been pleasure. "Surely she gets some time off," Marcus said mildly. "She does, and she can spend it however she chooses." "I just meant that I do not expect her to use her free time entertaining visitors to the ranch." Adelaide found her voice. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Dalton, but I am not looking for social engagements at present. I am still settling into my position here." Marcus accepted the refusal gracefully, but Adelaide noticed the speculative look he gave Nathaniel before the conversation moved to cattle prices and grazing rights. After he left, Nathaniel disappeared into his office without a word, and Adelaide was left wondering what exactly had just happened. She did not have to wonder long. Tom found her in the kitchen as she was finishing the evening dishes. "That was interesting," the foreman said, drying a plate. "What was?" "Nate getting all territorial over you." Adelaide nearly dropped the pan she was washing. "He was not being territorial. He was just clarifying my work situation." Tom's knowing smile said he did not believe that for a second. "Adelaide, I have known that boy since he was 14 years old. I have never seen him react to a woman the way he reacts to you. He is head over heels, even if he has not admitted it to himself yet." "That is ridiculous," Adelaide protested, but her heart was racing. "We barely know each other. Sometimes that does not matter. Sometimes you just know." Tom set down the dried plate and looked at her seriously. "Question is, how do you feel about him?" How did she feel? Terrified, exhilarated, hopeful, and about a dozen other emotions she could not name. "I think that is complicated given that I work for him. Life is complicated. Does not mean you should ignore what is right in front of you." Tom patted her shoulder in a fatherly gesture. "Just think about it, and maybe put the poor boy out of his misery before he drives himself crazy." After Tom left, Adelaide stood in the kitchen, hands submerged in cooling dishwater, and tried to think logically about her situation. Getting involved with Nathaniel was risky on multiple levels. If things went badly, she would lose her job and her home. People would talk, might assume the worst about their relationship. And yet, the thought of him caring for her the way Tom suggested made her feel lighter than air. She was still lost in thought when Nathaniel emerged from his office. He looked surprised to see her still in the kitchen. "You should have finished hours ago," he said. "I was just thinking." About Marcus Dalton, the question came out more strained than casual, and Adelaide made a decision. If Tom was right, if Nathaniel did have feelings for her, she wanted to know, needed to know. "Actually, I was thinking about what Tom said to me earlier." Nathaniel stiffened. "What did Tom say?" "That you might have feelings for me beyond those of an employer." She watched his face carefully, saw the flash of panic followed by resignation. "Tom has a big mouth," Nathaniel muttered. "Is he right?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Finally, Nathaniel let out a long breath and met her eyes. "Yes, he is right. I know I should not, that it is inappropriate given our working relationship, but I cannot seem to help it. Since the moment I saw you fighting those coyotes, you have been in my thoughts constantly." He ran a hand through his hair, agitated. "If you want to leave, find another position, I will understand. I will give you excellent references and enough money to get settled somewhere else. I never meant to make you uncomfortable." "What if I do not want to leave?" Adelaide heard herself say. "What if I have been thinking about you constantly too?" Nathaniel went very still. "Adelaide." The way he said her name, rough and full of longing, sent shivers down her spine. She crossed the distance between them, heart pounding, and placed her hand on his chest. She could feel his heart racing beneath her palm. "I do not know what I am doing," she admitted, "but I know I feel something when I am around you, something I have never felt before." "We should be sensible about this," Nathaniel said, even as his hand came up to cover hers. Think about the consequences. I have spent my whole life being sensible. Where did it get me? Stranded on the prairie fighting coyotes. She looked up at him, at this good, kind man who had given her a chance when she had nothing. Maybe it is time I took a risk on something that feels right. This feels right to you. His free hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle. Yes. Nathaniel lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Adelaide did not want to pull away. She wanted him, with a certainty that defied logic. When his lips finally met hers, it was soft and sweet and everything she had dreamed a first kiss should be. They broke apart after a moment, both breathing hard. Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "We are going to have to figure out how to make this work," he said. "I know. People will talk. Let them," he laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. "You are amazing, you know that? You are not so bad yourself, Cowboy." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other as the lamp burned low and the night deepened around them. Adelaide felt like she was standing on the edge of something vast and wonderful and terrifying. But with Nathaniel's arms around her, she was not afraid. The next morning, Adelaide woke in her cabin with a smile on her face and butterflies in her stomach. She and Nathaniel had talked for hours the previous night, sitting at the kitchen table and discussing how to navigate their changing relationship. They had agreed to be discreet, to maintain professional boundaries in front of the ranch hands at least initially, and to take things slowly. The slowly part lasted approximately 3 days. It was not that they meant to rush into things, but the attraction between them was magnetic. Nathaniel found excuses to be near her constantly, and Adelaide discovered herself manufacturing reasons to seek him out. Stolen moments in the barn, his hands on her waist as he helped her reach something on a high shelf. Brief kisses in the shadowy spaces between buildings when no one was watching. Long conversations on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. The ranch hands noticed, of course. They would have had to be blind not to see the way Nathaniel and Adelaide looked at each other, the way they gravitated together like planets in orbit. But rather than disapproval, the men seemed pleased. Tom wore a perpetual knowing smile, and Billy had started humming cheerful tunes while he worked. Even young James had commented that it was nice to see the boss happy. 3 weeks after that first kiss, Nathaniel asked Adelaide to accompany him on a ride to check the northern pastures. It was a beautiful late summer day, the sky impossibly blue and the prairie grass rippling like waves in the breeze. They rode side by side, occasionally letting their horses drift close enough that their legs brushed. When they reached a small creek that cut through the property, Nathaniel dismounted and helped Adelaide down. He spread a blanket in the shade of a cottonwood tree, and they sat together, eating the lunch Adelaide had packed and watching the cattle graze in the distance. "I have been thinking," Nathaniel said after they had eaten, "about us and the future." Adelaide's heart skipped. "What about it?" "I know we said we would take things slow, but I am not a patient man when it comes to things I want. And I want you, Adelaide, not just for now, but permanently." He turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "I know this is fast, maybe too fast by conventional standards, but out here in this life, you learn to recognize what matters and hold on to it. You matter to me, more than I can properly express." "You matter to me too," Adelaide whispered. "Then marry me." The words came out in a rush. "I know I should probably court you properly, buy you flowers and take you to dances in town. But the truth is, I already know you are the woman I want beside me for the rest of my life. You are strong and kind and brave, and you make me laugh, and I cannot imagine my days without you in them anymore." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. "Nathaniel, if you need time, I understand. I will wait as long as you need, but I had to tell you, had to ask." because every day I do not is a day wasted, and I am done wasting days. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The loss of her parents, the desperate journey west, the broken wagon and the circling coyotes. All of it had led her here, to this man, to this life. How could she call any of it wasted when it had brought her to Nathaniel? Yes, she said, watching his eyes go wide with hope. Yes, I will marry you. The kiss he gave her then was nothing like that first gentle brush of lips in the kitchen. This was fierce and claiming, full of promise and passion, and when they finally broke apart, Adelaide was dizzy with it. "How soon?" Nathaniel asked, pressing kisses to her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "How soon can we be married?" "I suppose that depends on how long it takes to arrange a wedding. There is a preacher in Lincoln. We could go tomorrow, be married by the end of the week if you want." Adelaide laughed at his eagerness, even as her own excitement built. "What about your ranch hands? Do we not owe them a celebration after they have been so supportive?" "You are right." Nathaniel forced himself to slow down, though his hand still held hers tightly. 2 weeks, then. That gives us time to plan something proper, invite the neighbors, do it right. 2 weeks, Adelaide agreed. They rode back to the ranch in a state of euphoria. And when Nathaniel announced their engagement at dinner that evening, the ranch hands erupted in cheers. Tom immediately appointed himself wedding planner, insisting they would hold the celebration at the ranch and make it an event the whole county would remember. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Nathaniel made a trip to Lincoln and returned with bolt upon bolt of beautiful fabric for Adelaide to make a dress, plus supplies for what Tom was calling the feast of the century. Adelaide spent her evenings sewing by lamplight, creating a simple but elegant dress in cream-colored silk that made her feel like a princess. The neighboring ranchers and townspeople responded to the invitations with enthusiasm. Apparently, eligible bachelor Nathaniel Young getting married was significant news. Adelaide met dozens of people in the days leading up to the wedding, all of them curious about the woman who had captured their neighbor's heart. One afternoon, a woman named Margaret Wilson arrived at the ranch with her 2 daughters. She ran a boarding house in Lincoln and had known Nathaniel's family for years. "I heard about your engagement and had to come see for myself," Margaret said, settling into the kitchen with a cup of coffee. "Nathaniel is a good man. His mother would have been so pleased to see him settled." "Did you know his parents well?" Adelaide asked, grateful for the chance to learn more about Nathaniel's history. "Oh yes, Catherine Young was my dearest friend. She died when Nathaniel was just 12, and it nearly broke his father's heart. That is why he threw himself into building this ranch, I think. Needed something to pour his grief into." Margaret smiled sadly. "Catherine would have loved you, dear. She always said Nathaniel would need a strong woman, someone who would not be content just to keep house, but who would be a true partner to him." The words warmed Adelaide's heart. "I hope I can live up to that. From what I hear about you fighting off coyotes with a frying pan, I do not think you will have any trouble." The story of Adelaide's unconventional introduction to the area had apparently spread throughout the county, much to her embarrassment and Nathaniel's amusement. But she had to admit it made for an excellent conversation starter. The night before the wedding, Adelaide lay awake in her cabin, listening to the prairie sounds outside her window. Tomorrow, her entire life would change. She would become Mrs. Nathaniel Young, mistress of this ranch, wife to a man she had known for less than 2 months but felt like she had been waiting for her entire life. Was she being foolish, rushing into marriage with someone who was still, in many ways, a stranger? But even as the doubts crept in, Adelaide knew the answer. Nathaniel was not a stranger, not really. In the weeks she had known him, He had shown her more kindness, respect, and genuine affection than anyone ever had. He made her laugh, challenged her to be brave, and looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. No, this was not foolish. This was right. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the late summer sun warming the prairie without the oppressive heat of earlier months. Adelaide dressed in her new gown with Margaret's help, the older woman having insisted on staying overnight to assist with preparations. "You look beautiful," Margaret said, pinning Adelaide's dark hair into an elegant arrangement. "Truly beautiful." Adelaide barely recognized herself in the small mirror. The cream silk brought out the warmth in her skin, and her eyes sparkled with excitement and nervousness. She looked like a bride, like a woman on the brink of her happily ever after. The ceremony was held in the ranch's main yard, under a makeshift arbor that the ranch hands had constructed and decorated with late-blooming wildflowers. Chairs had been arranged in rows, and it seemed like half the county had turned out to witness the occasion. Adelaide spotted Marcus Dalton among the guests, and was pleased to see he looked genuinely happy for them. Any earlier disappointment clearly resolved. But Adelaide only had eyes for Nathaniel, who stood waiting for her in his best suit, his face a mixture of awe and joy as she walked toward him on Tom's arm. The foreman had offered to give her away, and Adelaide had accepted gratefully, touched by the gesture. The preacher from Lincoln performed the ceremony, speaking about love and commitment and the building of a life together. Adelaide and Nathaniel spoke their vows in clear, firm voices, promising to honor and cherish each other through whatever the future might bring. When Nathaniel slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, Adelaide felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." Nathaniel cupped Adelaide's face in his hands and kissed her sweetly, thoroughly, while their guests erupted in cheers and applause. When they broke apart, both were grinning like fools. "Hello, Mrs. Young," Nathaniel murmured. "Hello, husband." The celebration that followed was everything Tom had promised, and more. Tables groaned under the weight of food that Adelaide and several neighbor women had prepared. There was music. A couple of ranch hands proved surprisingly talented with fiddle and guitar, and dancing that went on until the stars came out. Adelaide danced with Nathaniel, with Tom, with Billy and Red and Sam and James, with Marcus Dalton, and a dozen other men whose names she was still learning. But always she came back to Nathaniel. Always his eyes found hers across the crowd, full of love and promise. As the night grew late and the guests began to depart, Margaret pulled Adelaide aside. "You have a good man there, and I can see he has a good woman. Be happy together, dear. That is all that matters in the end." "Thank you," Adelaide said, embracing the older woman, "for everything." Finally, the last guest departed, and the ranch hands tactfully retreated to the bunkhouse, leaving Nathaniel and Adelaide alone. He swept her up into his arms, making her laugh in surprise. "What are you doing, carrying my bride over the threshold, as tradition demands?" He carried her into the main house, into his bedroom, which was now their bedroom, and set her gently on the bed. What followed was tender and sweet and occasionally awkward, as first times often are. But they laughed through the awkwardness, and Nathaniel was patient and gentle, and when Adelaide fell asleep hours later in her husband's arms, she had never felt more content or complete. The first year of marriage brought changes and challenges neither of them had fully anticipated. Adelaide discovered that being wife to a rancher was different from being the hired cook. The work was similar, but the emotional investment was deeper. This was her home now, her life, and she threw herself into making it everything it could be. She expanded the garden, putting in vegetables and herbs, but also flowers, bringing color and beauty to the practical ranch. She organized the main house, adding curtains and decorations, transforming it from a bachelor's dwelling into a real home. She learned more about cattle ranching than she had ever imagined she would need to know, until she could discuss breeding stock and market prices with the same confidence as any rancher. Nathaniel, for his part, proved to be everything Adelaide could have wanted in a husband. He valued her opinions, consulted her on ranch decisions, and made it clear that they were partners in every sense of the word. When she suggested selling eggs and butter in town to bring in extra income, he helped her build a chicken coop. When she wanted to learn to ride better, he spent hours patiently teaching her. When she woke from nightmares about being stranded on the prairie, he held her until she felt safe again. They had their disagreements, of course. Nathaniel could be stubborn about his methods, resistant to change even when Adelaide's suggestions had merit. Adelaide sometimes pushed too hard, forgetting that the ranch had operated successfully long before she arrived. But they learned to communicate, to compromise, to choose their battles and admit when they were wrong. The ranch hands remained a constant source of support and occasional entertainment. Billy taught Adelaide to play poker, though Nathaniel insisted the games remain friendly with no money changing hands. Red shared his mother's recipes, expanding Adelaide's cooking repertoire. Tom continued to offer fatherly advice, though now it was about marriage rather than courtship. Young James, who had seemed so shy initially, blossomed under Adelaide's motherly attention, and she made sure he never went without his favorite apple pie. Winter came to the Nebraska prairie with bitter cold and howling winds. Adelaide experienced her first true blizzard, 3 days of snow that buried the ranch under white drifts and kept everyone huddled inside. She worried constantly about the cattle, about the men who had to venture out to care for them, and especially about Nathaniel, who insisted on being in the thick of it despite the danger. "This is my responsibility," he told her when she begged him to stay inside during the worst of the storm. "These cattle, these men, they depend on me." "And I depend on you," Adelaide shot back. "What good is your sense of responsibility if you freeze to death?" They had argued, really argued for the first time, and Adelaide had spent an anxious night waiting for Nathaniel to return from checking the herd. When he finally stumbled in, half frozen and exhausted, her anger had evaporated into relief. She had stripped off his icy clothes, wrapped him in blankets, and made him hot coffee, all while lecturing him about being more careful. "I am sorry," Nathaniel had said once he could feel his fingers again. "You are right. I cannot help anyone if I am dead. I will be more cautious. Promise me." "I promise." They had learned something important in that fight, that their love included the right to be angry with each other, to disagree, to demand better, and that working through conflict only strengthened their bond. Spring arrived with a rush of green across the prairie and new calves in the pasture. Adelaide stood at the fence one morning, watching the young cattle frolic, and felt an unexpected pang of longing. She was 22 years old, married to a wonderful man, and increasingly she found herself thinking about children. She brought up the subject tentatively one evening as she and Nathaniel sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Have you thought about having a family?" she asked. "Children, I mean." Nathaniel turned to look at her, surprised but pleased. "I have thought about it." "Have you? Constantly lately?" Adelaide fidgeted with her wedding ring. "I know we have not been married long and there is no rush. But I wanted to know how you felt about it." "I would love to have children with you," Nathaniel said simply. "Sons to help run the ranch, daughters to spoil rotten, as many as you are willing to give me." Adelaide laughed. "Let us start with one and see how we manage." "Fair enough." He pulled her close, kissing her temple. When? I suppose that is up to nature to decide. As it turned out, nature decided fairly quickly. By early summer, Adelaide was fairly certain she was pregnant, though she waited to tell Nathaniel until she was absolutely sure. When she finally shared the news, he lifted her off her feet and spun her around, whooping with joy loud enough to bring the ranch hands running to see what the commotion was about. The pregnancy was both easier and harder than Adelaide had anticipated. The first few months brought nausea that made cooking a challenge, though she pushed through it. Nathaniel became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work and nearly driving her crazy with his hovering. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him after he had insisted on carrying a basket of laundry that probably weighed 5 pounds. "I know, I just want to keep you safe, both of you." His hand on her still flat stomach melted her irritation. "We will be fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. Not my woman, not my baby." As her belly grew, Adelaide found herself marveling at the changes in her body and the life growing inside her. Nathaniel would spend evenings with his hand on her stomach, talking to the baby, telling it about the ranch and the horses and how loved it already was. Adelaide would run her fingers through his hair and feel overwhelmed by how much her life had changed in such a short time. Margaret Wilson visited regularly, offering advice and reassurance. She had delivered countless babies in her years running the boarding house, and Adelaide was grateful for her steady presence and practical knowledge. In February of 1876, after 12 hours of labor that left Adelaide exhausted and Nathaniel a nervous wreck pacing the main room, their son was born. He came into the world squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his father's brown eyes. "A boy," Margaret announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped infant in Adelaide's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Nathaniel sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his son with wonder. "He is so small, he will grow," Adelaide said, smiling through her tiredness. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without reaching a decision, but looking at their son, Nathaniel knew immediately. "Nathan, after my father, Nathan James Young." "Nathan," Adelaide repeated, testing the name. Their son blinked up at her, already showing signs of calming. "Hello, Nathan. Welcome to the world." Fatherhood transformed Nathaniel in ways Adelaide had not expected. He was utterly devoted to his son, helping with feedings even though there was little he could actually do, changing nappies without complaint, walking the floor with Nathan when he cried in the night. The ranch hands were equally smitten, taking turns visiting to see the baby and arguing over who would teach him to ride when he was older. "He is not even a month old," Adelaide pointed out when Red and Billy were debating the merits of different teaching techniques. "I think we have some time." But she understood their excitement. Little Nathan had become the heart of the ranch, and watching Nathaniel with their son filled Adelaide with a joy so profound, it sometimes brought her to tears. The years that followed were full and busy. Nathan grew into a sturdy, curious toddler who followed his father around the ranch like a shadow. When he was 3, Adelaide became pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to a daughter they named Emma Rose. 2 years after Emma came another son, Samuel Thomas, named for Sam and Tom, who had become like uncles to the growing young family. The ranch prospered under Nathaniel and Adelaide's partnership. They expanded the herd, bought additional land, and became one of the most successful operations in the county. But for all their material success, it was the family they had built that mattered most. Adelaide sometimes thought back to that evening on the prairie, fighting off coyotes with a frying pan, certain she was going to die alone and forgotten. If someone had told her then that within 2 months she would be married to a wonderful man, that she would have children and a home and a life beyond anything she had dared to dream, she never would have believed it. But here she was. One evening when Nathan was 8, Emma was 5, and Samuel was 3, the family sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. The children were arguing playfully about who could catch the most fireflies, while Nathaniel and Adelaide sat close together, his arm around her shoulders. "You remember the day we met?" Nathaniel asked suddenly. "Of course. How could I forget? I was convinced I was going to die, and then this cowboy rode up laughing at me." "I was not laughing at you. I was impressed. Amazed, actually." He kissed her hair. "Best decision I ever made, offering you that job. Best decision I ever made was accepting it." Adelaide leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of him, soap and leather and the prairie wind. "Though I still maintain you hired me primarily because you could not cook to save your life." "That was a factor," he admitted with a laugh. "But I like to think I saw something special in you even then." "Papa, Mama, look!" Emma came running up, her small hands cupped around a captured firefly. "I got one." "That is wonderful, sweetheart," Adelaide said, admiring the insect's gentle glow. "Now let it go so it can find its family." Emma carefully opened her hands and the firefly took wing, rejoining its companions in their twilight dance. She ran back to join her brothers, and Adelaide watched them with contentment. 3 children, she mused. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it. Think we should try for one more?" Nathaniel asked, only half joking. "Maybe, though I am not getting any younger. You are 28, hardly ancient." Adelaide laughed. "Says the man who does not have to carry and birth the babies." "Fair point." He was quiet for a moment. "Adelaide, I need you to know something. These years with you, building this life together, raising our children, it has been better than anything I could have imagined. You made me complete in ways I did not even know I was missing." She turned to look at him, seeing the love and sincerity in his eyes. "You did the same for me. When I lost my parents, I thought I had lost everything. But you gave me a new family, a new home, a new purpose. You gave me everything." They kissed as the stars began to appear overhead and their children's laughter rang out across the ranch. It was a perfect moment, the kind that defines a life. The children grew, as children do. Nathan developed his father's love for ranching and his mother's quick mind, equally comfortable discussing cattle or debating philosophy. Emma was spirited and independent, already declaring at age 7 that she would be a rancher like her father, and would not let anyone tell her girls could not do such work. Samuel was gentle and artistic, preferring to sketch the animals rather than herd them, though he worked as hard as his siblings when needed. When Nathan was 10, Adelaide did become pregnant again, much to the older children's excitement. This time she gave birth to twin boys, which sent Nathaniel into a near panic about how they would handle 2 infants at once. But they managed, with help from the ranch hands who had remained loyal through the years, and from Margaret Wilson, who had become like a mother to Adelaide. The twins, Michael and Matthew, were terrors from the start, getting into everything and keeping everyone on their toes. But they also brought tremendous joy and laughter to the household. As the children grew older, Nathaniel and Adelaide made sure to teach them not just about ranching but about kindness, fairness, and the value of hard work. They hired a tutor to ensure the children received proper education, and Adelaide spent evenings reading to them, sharing her love of stories and learning. The ranch continued to thrive. By 1885, the Young Ranch was one of the largest and most respected operations in Nebraska. Nathaniel had earned a reputation as a fair employer and shrewd businessman, while Adelaide was known throughout the county for her generosity and community involvement. She had started a small school for the children of ranch families who lived too far from Lincoln to attend regularly, teaching them reading and arithmetic in the afternoons. Tom retired when he turned 65, though he refused to leave the ranch entirely. Nathaniel built him a small cabin near the main house, and the old foreman spent his days offering advice and spoiling the young children. Red had married a widow from Lincoln and moved to town, but Billy and Sam remained, now senior hands training a new generation of ranch workers. James, no longer quite so young, had become foreman, proving himself a capable leader. Through all the years, all the changes and challenges, Nathaniel and Adelaide's love remained the foundation of everything. They still found time to ride out to that cottonwood tree by the creek where he had proposed, still talked long into the night about their dreams and fears, still looked at each other with the wonder of people who had found something precious and rare. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathaniel surprised Adelaide with a piano, shipped all the way from Chicago. She had cried when she saw it, remembering the conversation they had had years ago about her love of music. "You said playing made you happy," Nathaniel reminded her. "You should have things that make you happy." Adelaide learned to play again, her fingers remembering the melodies her mother had taught her so long ago. She taught the children too, and summer evenings were often filled with music drifting from the ranch house across the prairie. The children began to grow into young adults. Nathan, at 18, was already taking on significant responsibilities at the ranch, working alongside his father and learning the business from the ground up. Emma, 15, remained determined to be a rancher, though Adelaide suspected she would also break a few hearts along the way with her striking looks and fierce independence. Samuel, 13, had discovered a talent for veterinary medicine and dreamed of attending university to study it formally. The twins, now 7, were still terrors but showed promise of settling down eventually. It was around this time that Nathaniel's brother Jackson finally wrote, after years of silence. He had struck it rich in the California gold fields and wanted to make amends for his long absence. He asked if he could visit, bring his wife and daughter to meet the family he had abandoned. Nathaniel struggled with the decision. His brother's desertion had hurt, even if he rarely spoke of it. But Adelaide encouraged him to extend forgiveness, to give Jackson a chance to be family again. "Life is too short for grudges," she told him, "and our children should know their uncle and cousin." So Jackson came, nervous and apologetic, with a kind wife named Patricia and a shy daughter named Helen who was close to Emma's age. The visit was awkward at first, years of separation difficult to bridge in a few days. But gradually, tentatively, the brothers began to reconnect. Jackson was awed by what Nathaniel had built, both the ranch and the family, and full of regret for missing out on so much. "I was a fool," Jackson admitted one evening as the brothers sat on the porch. "I thought adventure and fortune were more important than family. Took me years to realize I had already had everything that mattered right here." "You have your own family now," Nathaniel pointed out. "That is what matters. Will you forgive me for leaving you to handle everything alone?" Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. "I already have. Holding on to anger, it does not serve any purpose. You are my brother, and I am glad you are here." They embraced, and Adelaide watched from the doorway with tears in her eyes, grateful that her husband had such capacity for forgiveness. Jackson and his family stayed for 2 weeks, and by the time they left, the breach between the brothers had healed. They promised to write regularly and visit again, promises that this time were kept. The turn of the century approached, bringing with it changes to the West. The frontier was closing, towns growing into cities, the wild lands being tamed and settled. But some things remained constant: the sweep of the prairie, the rhythm of ranch life, the bonds of family and community. Nathan married at 21, bringing home a lovely young woman named Sarah who fit into the ranch family seamlessly. They gave Nathaniel and Adelaide their first grandchild, a boy, just before the new century dawned. Emma, to no one's surprise, showed no interest in marriage, instead partnering with her father and brother to manage the ranch and proving herself every bit as capable as any man. Samuel went off to university as planned, but returned with his degree to set up a veterinary practice in Lincoln, close enough to help with the ranch animals when needed. The twins, now grown men themselves, had different paths ahead. Michael wanted to try his hand at politics, believing he could help shape the new century's policies to benefit ranchers and farmers. Matthew, more adventurous, spoke of seeing the world before settling down. Nathaniel and Adelaide supported them both, understanding that each child had to forge their own way. One spring evening in 1902, Nathaniel and Adelaide sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the years. They were both in their mid-50s now, their hair showing threads of gray, their faces lined with years of sun and hard work and laughter. But their hands still fit together perfectly, and their love had only deepened with time. "You ever regret it?" Nathaniel asked suddenly. "Giving up teaching, marrying a rancher, tying yourself to this place?" Adelaide looked out at the ranch that had been her home for over a quarter-century. She saw Nathan and Sarah's house nearby, smoke rising from the chimney. She saw the barn where Emma was probably still working despite the late hour. She saw the land that had given them so much, that had witnessed their joys and sorrows, their triumphs and struggles. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This life with you, it is everything I never knew I wanted, everything I needed." "Even the coyotes," Nathaniel teased. Adelaide laughed. "Especially the coyotes. If not for them, I would not have been swinging that frying pan, and you would not have stopped to laugh at me." "Best entertainment I ever witnessed," he said, grinning at the memory. "This crazy woman fending off predators with cooking equipment. I knew right then you were something special. You said I was hired, and you were. Best hiring decision I ever made, even if it took me a while to figure out I wanted to hire you for life." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the prairie in gold and crimson just like it had that first evening so many years ago. Their grandchild's laughter drifted from Nathan's house, and somewhere in the distance cattle lowed softly. "I love you, Adelaide Young," Nathaniel said. "Have from the start, will until the end. And I love you, you impossible cowboy." They kissed as the stars emerged, the same stars that had witnessed their wedding, the births of their children, all the moments that had woven their lives together. Adelaide thought about the frightened young woman she had been, stranded and alone, fighting for her life. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, to this man, to this life, and she was grateful for every step. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and inevitable sorrow. Tom passed away peacefully in his sleep at 78, and the entire county turned out for his funeral. Adelaide wept for the man who had been father figure and friend, who had helped her find her place in this Western life. Sam followed a few years later, kicked by a horse and gone before anyone could help him. Each loss left a hole in the ranch family, but also reminded them to cherish the time they had. Billy lived to see 90, regaling the younger generation with stories of the old days until the very end. James married late but happily, bringing his wife to live on the ranch and raising 3 children who grew up alongside the younger Youngs. Nathan and Sarah had 4 more children, ensuring the ranch would continue into the next generation. Emma never did marry, but she became a legend in Nebraska ranching circles, a woman who could outrope, outride, and outnegotiate most men. She took over management of the ranch as Nathaniel gradually stepped back, proving herself a worthy successor. Samuel's veterinary practice thrived, and he married a teacher from Lincoln who appreciated his gentle nature. Michael did go into politics, serving in the state legislature and fighting for the interests of rural Nebraskans. Matthew traveled the world for 5 years before returning home, declaring that he had seen enough to know that Nebraska was where he belonged. He married, settled near the ranch, and started his own smaller operation with his father's help. Through it all, Nathaniel and Adelaide remained the heart of the family. Their love story became the stuff of local legend, the cowboy and the woman he found fighting coyotes with a frying pan. Young couples came to them for advice, and they always said the same thing: find someone who makes you brave, who makes you laugh, who makes you want to be better than you are. On their 40th anniversary, the family threw a massive celebration. Children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren filled the ranch, along with friends and neighbors from across the county. Adelaide, now 62 but still sharp and energetic, looked around at the gathering with wonder. Did you ever imagine this? She asked Nathaniel as they watched their great-grandson chase fireflies just as their own children had done decades before. All of this, from that one meeting. I imagined you, Nathaniel said simply. He was 64 now, his hair white and his face deeply lined, but his eyes still held that same warmth that had captured Adelaide's heart so long ago. From the moment I saw you swinging that pan, I imagined a life with you in it. The details might have surprised me, but the feeling, that was there from the start. I was terrified of you at first, Adelaide admitted. This handsome cowboy offering me a job, a home, it seemed too good to be true. And now I know it was exactly what it seemed, a gift, a chance at happiness I had stopped believing in. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Thank you for laughing at me that day. Thank you for stopping, for helping, for seeing something in me worth keeping. The thanks should be all mine. You made my house a home, my life complete. He kissed her forehead. Here is to 40 more years. I do not know if we will get 40 more, Adelaide said practically. But however many we get, I will treasure each one. They did not get 40 more years, but they got 15, and they were good years. They watched their grandchildren marry and have children of their own, watched the ranch continue to prosper under Emma's capable leadership, watched the new century bring automobiles and telephones, and all manner of changes to their corner of Nebraska. Nathaniel passed first, at 79, his heart simply giving out one morning as he sat on the porch watching the sunrise. Adelaide found him there, peaceful and still, and though her heart shattered, she also felt grateful that he had gone gently without suffering in the place he loved most. She lived another 5 years without him, surrounded by family but acutely aware of the empty space at her side. She spent her days with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories of the old days, of their grandfather and the life they had built together. She played piano every evening, the music a comfort in her loneliness. On a warm summer evening in 1922, Adelaide sat on the porch one last time. She was 84 years old, her children and grandchildren gathered inside for dinner, and she felt a profound sense of peace. She had lived a long, full life. She had loved deeply and been loved in return. She had built something lasting, not just in the ranch but in the family that would carry on after her. As the sun painted the prairie gold and crimson, Adelaide closed her eyes and remembered. She remembered being 21 and terrified, swinging a frying pan at circling coyotes. She remembered a cowboy's laugh rolling across the grassland like thunder. She remembered the moment he said, "You are hired," and changed her life forever. She remembered love in all its forms, in all its beauty. And smiling, Adelaide Lawrence Young took her last breath and went to join her cowboy, wherever he was waiting. Emma found her there an hour later, peaceful in her chair as the stars emerged overhead. And though they mourned, the family also celebrated, knowing that Adelaide had lived exactly the life she wanted, had loved exactly the way she needed to, and had left behind a legacy that would endure for generations. The ranch continued, as Adelaide would have wanted. Great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren worked the land, raised cattle, and told stories of the woman who had fought coyotes with a frying pan, and the cowboy who had been wise enough to see her worth. Young couples in love would visit the cottonwood tree by the creek, where Nathaniel had proposed so many years ago, seeking the same kind of magic that had blessed the Youngs. And sometimes, on quiet summer evenings when the fireflies danced and the prairie wind whispered through the grass, people swore they could hear piano music drifting from the old ranch house, and the sound of two people laughing together, happy and in love even beyond the boundaries of life itself. The story of Adelaide and Nathaniel became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of taking chances, of being brave when life demands it, of recognizing love when it arrives unexpectedly. It became a reminder that the best things in life often come from the most unlikely circumstances, from broken wagons and circling predators, from a woman refusing to give up and a man wise enough to appreciate her strength. Their great-great-granddaughter, another Adelaide, wrote a book about them decades later, ensuring their story would be preserved for future generations. She interviewed everyone who remembered them, collected letters and photographs, and pieced together a love story that had shaped an entire family. "What do you think made their marriage so successful?" someone asked at the book launch. Adelaide the younger smiled, thinking of the stories she had heard all her life. "I think they saw each other clearly, from the very beginning. He saw a woman who would not quit even when facing death. She saw a man who would help a stranger without expectation of reward. They built their love on that foundation of mutual respect and genuine liking, and everything else grew from there." "And the Coyotes?" someone else asked. "Do you think she really fought them off with a frying pan?" "Every word is true," Adelaide confirmed. "We still have that frying pan, actually. It is in a place of honor at the ranch. Great-great-grandmother Adelaide used it for years after, said it reminded her that she was strong enough to handle whatever life threw at her." The frying pan became a family treasure, passed down through generations along with the story of how a cowboy found a woman swinging it at coyotes and saw not a victim but a fighter, not a damsel in distress, but a partner worthy of spending a lifetime with. And on the Nebraska prairie, on land that had witnessed so much history, the Young ranch continued to thrive, generation after generation adding their own chapters to the story, while honoring the legacy of the couple who started it all. Because some love stories are not just about two people finding each other. They are about building something that lasts, creating a legacy that ripples out through time, touching lives that the original lovers would never meet but would undoubtedly cherish. Adelaide and Nathaniel's story was one of those. A tale of the Wild West, of survival and strength, of laughter and love, of a frying pan and circling coyotes, and a cowboy wise enough to recognize his future when he saw her fighting for her life. It was, in every sense, a love that lasted forever.